Welcome to You've Been Owned, the podcast where we talk about all things cyber, including incidents, what went wrong, and what we can hopefully learn from them. My name is Gary Perkins. I have the pleasure of serving as the Chief Information Security Officer for CISO Global, a company that meets all your cybersecurity needs. I'm joined here today with Lock Langdon. He's the VP of Security, Chief Information Security Officer at Aprio. Lock, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and the company and how you do the magic you do?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. So I work for Aprio. We are a business advisory firm. So think of like the KPMGs or the PwCs of the world. We're number 25. They're the big four, right? So we focus primarily on private corporate tax. We do audit assurance, outsourced accounting, management. And then we also we recently acquired a firm here in Arizona, a law firm.
Nice.
So we're getting into the legal space. So it's definitely a lot of growth, a lot of opportunities, and a lot of acquisitions as part of our growth strategy.
Business is booming then, you would say.
It is definitely booming. It's an interesting space to be in right now.
So if you're talking about acquisitions, and it sounds like you're doing quite a few of them, and then how do you ensure that they're safe? I mean, your organization may be fully secure, but every time you bring in a new organization, that presents additional risk, as we've seen in the past through other breaches.
Yeah, it's definitely a primary focus for me and my team, and then we also have a fairly large diligence group. So Aprio at large is acquiring 7 to 9 companies a quarter.
Oh, wow.
Now.
I got to admit, man, all I'm hearing in my head is risk.
Yeah.
Every one of those presents additional risk to me.
It's definitely an interesting space. The financial services space is similar to healthcare a few years ago, where there was a lot of acquisitions because of new regulations, a lot of complexity being added to these smaller partnership organizations that, they can't have a CISO, they can't have a privacy officer. They're just too small, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're talking maybe 10, 20 people in a company. So by being that small, the burden of compliance, privacy, regulatory almost negates their potential for profit. So that's where you're seeing a lot of consolidation in the industry, and Aprio is one of the leaders in that space.
Oh, nice. I do agree that I'm not one of those pie in the sky CISOs who thinks that, wow, you're a 10-person organization. Naturally, one of those people is going to be the chief security officer. That's unrealistic. And yet these smaller organizations are still targeted, and they because they have something of value, or there's the perception that they do. So how do you go about making sure that these organizations, when they come in, have appropriate security posture?
Yeah, I mean, it is a big issue. You have every end of the spectrum. They could be a 20-person company and be one of the most safe and secure organizations you've ever seen. They could be an organization bigger than us, and they could be just as scary and ill prepared for a cybersecurity incident as many companies can be. So we do a lot of due diligence, right? Like that's the primary focus of we hard fought battles to learn and grow and understand how to do mergers efficiently, but also safely.
Yeah,
and
you'd
securely.
have to be really good at it with the number that you're bringing in. You would have to be absolute experts in bringing them in and making sure that there's no residual risk, or that you're not incurring, that you've got eyes wide open.
Yeah, I mean, I've been at other organizations. So, coming through my career, I've been at healthcare companies. I've been at financial firms. I've been at, large mega companies that buy and sell companies. So the M&A story, while it's different every time, it's also very similar. So it really is about that upfront diligence, having the wherewithal as an organization to make that investment to do it properly. The easiest thing to say is, oh, we'll acquire them and then we'll worry about.
We'll figure it out later.
Yeah.
I've heard that one.
No, that never
An
happens.
incident, you're in the headlines, and that's crazy.
Yeah.
So these organizations that you see, they've got to be all different states of maturity, and they come in, and some of them are probably asking, what is cybersecurity?
Yeah.
And then others, you're just pleased that they already have a number of these items in place. I know I've got my hygiene ones. I've got the technical ones, and then I've got the non-technical ones. And I always send people my top 10, but it's shocking how few people even do the basics, get those top 10, where 50% is not a pass, man. You have to be doing all 10 of these things.
Yeah, it is, and I think that's a great call out, like the basics, right? Like the industry at large is changing, right? Cybersecurity is a fairly well trod area nowadays, right? CISOs have been around for multiple decades, so having that understanding and some of the regulatory changes within financial services, like the IRS has a lot of great recommendations, but there's not a lot of, thou shalls. Like if you're a publicly traded entity, you have like the SEC now with some of their reporting requirements.
It's amazing the amount of commonality, though, by all the top 10, the top 20. There's so much overlap. It's the same things. And it is those basics and doing them consistently that hopefully stops up to 80% of the breaches, because what we know is you can't stop all of them. Yep. No organization globally is immune to attack. I love seeing what countries like or places like Australia, but also the UK. But I was a little bit sobered by UK's recent admission that what they were doing with these public sector organizations wasn't working. So they were going to take another shot at it. And I saw one news article, I don't know if this is true or not, that said that they realized that they need a CISO. Like, okay, I'm pretty sure I could have told you that some time ago. But yeah, it is really encouraging to see what's happening in places like Australia.
Yeah, I think the specifics of kind of what you're talking about, which is I think leading into the security theater conversation. So that ties back to what we really look for when we're doing a merger or an acquisition is, are they doing the essential things properly? Do they have policies? Do they follow those policies?
Yes.
Do they have procedures? Do they follow those procedures? So it is, kind of like a mini audit every time.
I'd be looking for a risk register. Yep. I'd want to know that you're doing risk assessments anytime you introduce a new system or material change to an existing one. These are some of the things that I'd be looking for. And then, of course, there are the technical ones as well. I want to know that you're running, a top endpoint security client, that you've got email security, that you've got MFA enforced consistently across the board. Because what we know is that when you don't have these things, you end up with an incident.
Yep. Or you have an incident occurring that you don't know about, and as soon as
that's the one I'm worried about. I'm thinking about some stories in the past. I'm not going to name some names, but they did bring organizations into the fold, and only to find out that those organizations had been compromised for some time. So that's definitely a concern for me. And I think it's an afterthought, because in my history with M&A activity, it's usually a hush hush until it's done. Mm-hmm. Well, did you involve your IT and security teams ahead of that? Generally, that's not the case, but I think that you guys must be doing it well.
We do quite a bit, right? We have three key phases. We've got pre-letter of intent, which is the conversation side of it. Then you have a letter of intent, which is kind of like, hey, we've reached business terms and we are going to agree to move forward. Then you have that deeper diligence where you're digging into very specific details, and then you have your acquisition phase, which is public announcement, and then your onboarding. So one of the things that luckily I when I started at Aprio, they were around 1,500 person company. We're over 3,500 now, so that gives you kind of a perspective. Yep. I've been there 3 years.
Oh, wow.
So that's all occurred in 3 years, or a little bit less than 3 years. One of the early conversations that I had, and this is in my opinion, a strong recommendation if you can do it, if your organization is doing M&As, is, the acquisition, it sounds crass, but they get fired on Friday. And they're hired on Monday, right? So you have to have a clean cut on their accounts. You have to have a clean cut on their devices if you can afford it, or potentially re-imaging with your baseline if they have like newer laptops and they don't want to get rid of them. And you have to do data migration. So it's a lot of down in the weeds, nitty gritty, like IT work. So IT has to be a key stakeholder in that conversation. To your point, so understanding early, the amount of effort, and then have that conversation with the business M&A team who's really focusing on revenue and some of those capabilities.
Oh, man. I'm just thinking about this because most organizations, when a person changes roles within the company, can't master what you were talking about, which is reducing them down to that employee role and then building them back up from there and doing that kind of RBAC internally. And you're talking about doing this for a whole firm, but you have to. Otherwise, you're going to be in the headlines. Now, one of the other things that's crossing my mind right now is so many of these organizations fail to do the basics consistently, And I've seen some scenarios where they have so few controls in place that my strategy, my recommendation is slightly different. I recommend they get an incident response retainer because they're probably going to need it before they get these other controls in place.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I look for in organizations, and I tell them consistently, folks, you got to have a couple of things. One, you've got to have an incident response plan. You've got to have an incident response team, whether it's dedicated, which is rare, virtual, made up of people within your organization, or on retainers so that you can call somebody. You know who you're going to call when you have a problem. Then you have to exercise it. You have to do those drills. And in addition, it's nice to have some run books and that kind of thing. But test all of this. I would want to make sure that I had that pretty robust because, again, when I go back to it, I'm thinking just of all the risks that come in when one of these organizations is joined, is added. And by that point, I can only imagine people are so interested in seeing that organization come in and break down these silos and kind of assimilate that they're not always thinking about some of the risks.
Yeah, I mean that's a great call out too. Like the practice, right? Like the tabletops. The best battle plan lies. Works until the first arrow flies. Right?
Yep.
So
or everybody has
is,
a plan until they get punched in the face. Yeah.
That's a great call out, right? Like I think that's a critical aspect of any security program is that practice, right? Like go through scenarios, go through an M&A scenario, go through a BCDR scenario, all the things that we do. But that practice exposes so many things, and I think that's a critical aspect of it too for us.
Yep, I can only imagine when you're bringing these organizations in, and it's like, as you say, a mini audit, and you're assessing the different components, and there's gaps, there's major items that are missing. It's like, wait a second, why did you think that you didn't need backups? What were you going to do? Have you tested those things? Because we hear all the stories where somebody goes to restore from backups, and what happens? They're corrupt too.
You get your backups pre-ransomware. It's it
nice.
makes it so much easier.
Nice, yeah.
So one of the other aspects there too, I think that I think is important for us is as part of that diligence, understanding your business goal. And there's many levels of M&A, and sometimes it's this M&A is happening, figure out how to make it work safely, or they, to your point, if you're earlier in the conversation, can you make a weight statement of like, this is a risky acquisition. So as leaders, understanding and communicating to the executive leadership why it's important for you to have that kind of risk perspective and communicate with them so that they respect that, and then they can really articulate, well, maybe this acquisition isn't as good as we thought it was because of all these underlying, they don't have any backups, they don't have any policies, they don't have any procedures, and there's potential that there's a significant risk there.
Mm-hmm.
If it isn't worth hiring a third party to come in and do either a preliminary discovery or do even a full internal pen test or audit, is that margin worth acquiring this entity, right? Like those are real conversations.
I think they're great conversations to be having at the business level. I think that really our job is to help educate the business about risk. Yep. It's not to say no all the time. If your security team is just telling you no all the time, you should probably get rid of your security team, right? And that's what I always say is that my job is helping organizations find religion around security before there's an incident, because afterwards it's a lot easier once they've seen what can happen out there. And that also said, when we look through 2025, I see all the different breaches and many of the ransomware incidents, which seem to be on the uprise, more gangs getting involved there. Why? Because it's profitable. But the thing that I had noticed last year, a shift was definitely hitting smaller organizations, including doctors, including lawyers, and insurance organizations and CPAs. And I'm going to say that attorney-client privilege doesn't mean a whole lot when the information is all exposed on darknet, right? So
there's higher value. Credit card numbers are almost worthless nowadays because they're you can buy so many. So it's healthcare data, it's tax data, it's revenue, right? Or intellectual property too. Like depending upon if you're an individual threat actor or a nation state level threat actor, right? Like there's different targets. So understanding kind of like what your exposure is, who's going to be going after you, nation states, hopefully you got the FBI on speed dial, right? Like most organizations can't operate at that level. But having a plan if that does happen, I think is a great hygiene kind of.
Now, do you have the conversation with these organizations around what their crown jewels are? Do they even know that's that critical systems and data that without it, that they wouldn't be an entity?
I mean, for us, a lot of times it's fairly straightforward because they're similar entities that we're acquiring. So it's usually client information, PII, but that may be a novel software application they've written, right? So then you have to do like a full analysis of intellectual property ownership. Did they, copy a bunch of Git repos with a bunch of vulnerabilities, and now we've got NPM flying around out there everywhere, right? We've all been dealing with that, but the specifics and the nuance, it's really case by case, and that's why you have to have such a strong diligence program, and the business needs to really invest in that, and part of that is the cyber side of it.
I can only imagine that these organizations, again, they're focused on delivering value to their clients and doing what they do best. So if that's a law firm, they're focused on delivering those services to their clients. They're not thinking about what if somebody comes along and wants to help themselves to my data. And it leaves me wondering whether we need to go to something like the Essential 8. And I appreciate that Australia is, itemize these things and that they're in effect for public sector, but there's a significant amount of private sector out there, which historically I thought would be self-policing because they'd basically go out of business. But then I'm thinking about the small, medium business, and a lot of them say, oh, well, we can't afford that. But I find myself wondering how much value that holds when the data is not worth any less. Like my information that you're holding is valuable to me and to the bad guys, regardless of how large your organization is. So what are you doing to protect it? And a lot of these times they don't have anything.
I think that privacy at large is such a huge conversation point, right? And a lot of times privacy gets lumped in with cyber, but it is its own beast, right? Like GDPR came in and it really was just a cannon shot across the bow of everybody. It destroyed kind of the long-standing, data agreements that were out there internationally. And even GDPR is going through a refresh iteration, right? Like in a lot of, you see California, adopting CPRA, CCPA, Texas, New York, right? They've all got like these mini GDPRs, for lack of a better term. And there's no like comprehensive strategy around it. So it is fragmenting, at least in the US, so seeing like company or country level regulations is interesting. It's also, that push pull of regulation versus, private entity regulation. And it's a tough conversation. I know there's been 3 bills around like a US privacy law that have just died, very quickly because it is such a broad, misunderstood area. And I think AI is, everybody loves to talk about AI nowadays. But that's such a huge component. And now it's like a black box where people don't even know what's in there anymore. And you're talking to an LLM and it could spit out some you just ask it for like, hey, I want some fake data to test the database. And it might give you like some real database of credit card numbers. And
that's true. I'm going to go home and test that.
I mean, the poisoning and pen testing of AI models is a whole other world that we're having to deal with now.
Yeah, I think the raising the privacy angle is an interesting one. I think it is not well understood by people what is personally identifiable data, and I'm not convinced that some of the ones that are holding the most precious data that we have, that they've got sufficient controls in place to protect it. And I still think, despite it being 2026, that there's a lot of the if I just keep my head down or I've got slightly better controls than the next guys, like the bear in the forest analogy, that I won't be a target. And it's like, wake up. No, none of those folks that are in the news chose to be a target, right? Yeah. They didn't wake up and say, I really want to be a victim today. So,
I mean, that's a great scenario that's near and dear to my heart. Like we've tabletopped international acquisitions, right? Like most of our M&A activity has been US based. So it's fairly well understood and well trod. But we've sat down and we've thought, well, what if we acquire a UK entity? What if we acquire an EU entity? What if we acquire a Canadian entity?
Has to be a consideration, absolutely.
And when you start to dig into that, there are so many nuances that, you can't just go, I'm going to go buy this company in this country because, like Canada, CPRA, Canadian, or the Canadian Revenue, CRA, Canadian Revenue Agency, explicitly states you cannot move Canadian citizen tax data over the border without their approval. GDPR, like there's European, you've got the workers' councils that you have to go to. Generally, you get Germany to agree, and the rest of the workers' councils will agree because they're the most stringent, other than the Nordics. But like those are so many like sub nuances. We were joking about coming in and setting up our own podcast and have a little ring light and everything will be great and we can do our own podcast. But we come in here and we see all the complexity, the real detail that goes into that.
Yeah.
Like that is everywhere in privacy and regulatory and India and Brazil. Like there's so many like nuances that you have to understand before you really dig into that I don't think anybody can safely say that they can just close their eyes and hope for the best, because guess what, there's going to be percent of revenue fines coming after you if you do this wrong. Like those are real world risk scenarios.
I think this is super important to bring up because I have naturally some experience with Canada and privacy law. My last gig was running security at the BC government, British Columbia government, for 10 years. And it was really impressive, all the controls and safety put in place for protecting people's personal information. Yeah. And then public cloud comes on the scene and is popularized. And we made every possible like kind of concession and adjustment to be able to still use public cloud and obey like data residency sovereignty requirements. But in the end, it made it impossible and had to change the legislation. So that's pretty fascinating when technology advancements are now starting to change legislation and controls like that, because we still want to ensure that this information is protected. It's valuable. Mm-hmm. I'm probably going to die on this horse because I know there's a lot of people that have given up and they say, well, everything's already been breached a million times. Why should I care? But I hopefully that's just the young folks still. Yeah. And that we still see some value in the information being protected, because I'd like to believe that I've dedicated my life to this. I've spent decades protecting this information and preventing the bad guys from getting their way. Not always successful, but I just keep trying.
Yeah. I think the complexity and the technology that's out there, that I agree, a point piece of data, maybe not as impactful, but as soon as you start looking at the ability to correlate that information across cell phones, across, personal healthcare, databases and AI can start to correlate all that information in seconds. Like then you really have the kind of big brother scenario that everybody, worries about. And that I think is probably a little bit more concerning to individuals if you can like understand the ability to correlate this information and how fast it is.
Yeah, everybody identify. Yeah. I think that when you talk to people, they're already assuming that their data is being used for all these weird and wonderful ways. Like in the medical field, I was surprised to see that people thought that we were already going through all of the research, including their own personal test results, to advance health. But in actuality, there's a number of controls that are in place. So it's very interesting that they already assume that we're doing it, but we're not doing it because we want to protect them. So I
think it comes back to people generally are okay if you're using it for good.
Yeah.
But people use it for evil too, right? And that everybody jokes that Instagram is listening to me, which is why I got this ad. No, it's your correlated data that they're aggregating on the back end that's creating that algorithm about you, and it thinks you would want this, and it just happens to hit every once in a while.
Yeah. Man, I usually say that I think about moving off grid each week, and this week is not an exception. It's like, save me from the technology. So again, going back to these organizations that are hopefully doing the preparation ahead of time. So those key controls that they've got to have in place, I recommended several. I know that this is a tall order for smaller organizations. Mm-hmm. They may be lucky to have a director of IT, and not that cybersecurity is an IT function, but it's often found there. They have a director of IT, and then that's it. They've got, they're focused all of their efforts on providing these services to their clients. So what we're advocating are things like, well, you've still got to have some kind of plan.
Mm-hmm.
So when an incident happens, you're not just sitting there with a dumb look on your face. So you've got to have a plan, whether it's a big plan or a small plan, and then you've got to know who you're calling for this. And if you really are that small, get a retainer with a local firm who can come in. The experts can take care of it, because I know you are hoping that it doesn't happen to you. But when it does, that's going to be your number one priority when your business is down. And I've dealt with so many of those over 2025 where they call and they're a manufacturing organization and they can't manufacture. So what are some of the other controls either ahead of time that they need to figure out? Or I'm also interested in, now you're inevitably in the position where you've had an incident and you don't even know the severity of it yet. It might be something small, or it might be the end of the world. So what are some of the things that they can do ahead of time to prepare and once the breach hits?
Yeah. I love the concept of tabletops, right? Like, because it at least, even if it's just like a personal, you can even use like a chatbot now and be like, hey, role play this with me. But that concept of, I think a lot of technologists, right? Because a lot of technology people are focused on the technology, which is you're doing the work, right? Like nobody wants to have an insecure desktop. So it's having that paperwork, the say what you do and do what you say, right? That's the core of it. And then there's a lot of great frameworks out there. NIST, CSF is a great starting point. It's fairly small.
I love it. You can download it right now and do a free assessment against it, like yourself. I mean, granted, to understand it. And even you dropped one, you said tabletop, and maybe some of our listeners don't even know the references to an exercise or a drill that we do when we're sitting right here, and that we don't have to invest and do 5-day war games, but we'll still learn something from it. And that's what I say. As long as you had any actions or learnings out of that, then it was worth doing.
Yep. Yeah, and it can be something as simple as like, if my server crashed tomorrow, what would I do? I would restore it. I would recover. And then you can have those RTO, return to recovery point objective, recovery time objective, and just write those down. Like, you get credit for that. Like, that's real world stuff that when it hits the fan and you're scrambling, I've got a document that gives me kind of a step-by-step what to do. And it helps you in that moment. Kind of
you're
focus.
More prepared than you were. The most common one, of course, I think that people are doing drills, and because it's one of the most common incidents, is either business email compromise or ransomware. And I think it's a particularly useful one, even though it's not my favorite thing to talk about all the time. But if you imagine that you've been ransomware, somebody clicked on a link or attachment, it's happening all the time.
It's still a multi-billion-dollar industry for a reason.
It really is, and it works. So somebody in accounting clicks on that link or attachment. Time passes while all your systems are encrypted. Your data is encrypted, and then when the ransom note hits and the demand, the organization is like, well, do we have backups? And we can just restore from them. And maybe their backups were affected, or maybe they weren't. Maybe they were disconnected and that they're able to leverage them. But I feel like they often miss the fact that nowadays the information is always exfiltrated first.
Yeah.
And so you're not really paying to get the data back as much as to not have the data posted on internet. And the reason I like this for a drill is you have that conversation with the business about their appetite for paying under these circumstances before you actually have the incident occur. Yep. Because I know that a lot of folks struggle with this decision. And depending on who you ask, some will say pay, and some will say don't pay. I say it's a business decision still. It's still not illegal that I'm aware of to make these payments.
I'm not a lawyer. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I don't play one on TV either. It's like, so it is a deeply personal decision for organizations that they have to decide. But I would hope that they'd put the effort in ahead of time to hopefully not get to that position.
Yeah, and I think that leads into like a cyber liability insurance plan conversation, right? I'm willing to lose this much money, but maybe you cover it with an insurance policy, or it makes more sense to have an incident retainer, or like you can pay a little bit of money up front to hopefully prevent a lot of pain and cost later.
I love what you're saying, because you're always a business minded, focused there, because I've run into too many professionals in the past, and they're fully willing to secure things to Fort Knox level, but you would never spend $10 million securing something worth $1 million unless you can show that you're going to have 10 incidents that are going to surpass that, right? It's just not business.
Then you should be looking
business
for a new
sense.
job anyway.
Especially if you're having repeated incidents like that, you're probably just not that great at what you do. Lock, I really want to thank you for your time today and sharing your knowledge and experience. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Awesome. And that's the end of the podcast. Please tune in next time for more stories of breaches, incidents, everything that goes right and wrong. I'd like to thank NextSpace for hosting us in this fantastic facility, Jeff and the AV team for working their magic, and for everybody that's watching, I'd like to thank you for viewing. Let's stay safe out there.